Buddha as Scapegoat, René Girard and Origins of Buddhist Culture, book endorsement from internationally eminent scholars. My book is winner of the Korea Christian Publication Association Book Award 2013. Ilkwaen Chung, Buddha and Scapegoat, René Girard and Origins of Buddhist Culture, Seoul, SFC Publications, 2013. Hardcover. This book is winner of the Korea Christian Publication Association Book Award 2013. This book aims to analyze the process of idolization of enlightenment of Buddhas in the light of Girard's scapegoat mechanism. This book explores the unveiled scapegoat mechanism in Buddhism. It's very long, but enough to be very impressed. If it is published in English, it will be a bombshell and will provoke lively discussion. Dr. John Darcy May. For a detailed discussion, see my other publications Deconstructing the Buddhist Philosophy of Nothingness, René Girard and Violent Origins of Buddhist Culture. Contrary to all superficial Western theses on Buddhism, which seem to know this religion only as a peaceful and harmonious attitude to meditation, the author diligently emphasizes how much Buddhism must be understood in terms of ritual contexts, which can also be traced back to mythical sources. Wolfgang Palaver, Leopold Franzens Universität Innsbruck, leader of the university's interdisciplinary research program on World Order, Religion, Violence. He was also president of the Colloquium on Violence and Religion, author of René Girard's Mimetic Theory, Studies in Violence, Mimesis, and Culture, translated by Gabriel Borid, Michigan State University Press, 2013. Comments on Deconstructing the Buddhist Philosophy of Nothingness by Ilkwaen Chung. This is a truly remarkable piece of work. You seem to have read everything on Buddhism and its Indian origins, from the German classics to contemporary postmodernists, and synthesized it all in the framework of Girard's powerful hypothesis. Let me say from the outset that I'm wary of theories that purport to explain everything, especially when they culminate in an apologia for the uniqueness and superiority of Christianity, but I'm excited about the social anthropological approach to which Girard leads you. I think this sort of work is sorely lacking in studies on religion and interreligious dialogue, and it amounts to a drastic deconstruction of many favored ideas about the sublimity of Buddhism. I often wondered how Girard's thesis would apply to Buddhism, without having had the opportunity to go into it. Now I know. Again, whether everything can or must be traced back to a founding sacrifice is another matter, but the wealth of material you present together with your critique of the textualization and idealization of Buddhism by Western scholarship provokes a reassessment of the way Buddhism has been received in the West. In particular, your account of the associations of Buddhism with violence, way back to the violent ascetics of ancient India, adds powerful evidence to the critiques already proposed, e.g. of Zen in Imperial Japan. Your contextualization of Anatman and Sunyata in the violence of world renunciation and your suggestion that the resulting non-dualism entails the impossibility of ethics strengthens my impression of Buddhism's remoteness from the sphere of time and history and consequently its vulnerability to political and moral manipulation. The fascism of Nishitani alongside Heidegger, Tucci. Shocking. Yet one has to account for movements like socially engaged Buddhism inspired by figures like Buddhata SA. Are these reflex Western influences, or a rediscovery of Buddhism's innate ethical potential? I was brought up on the Theravada, because I studied in Münster at Hackers Institute, so I have a strong sense of the ethical standards of the Padamaka. Is there perhaps a fruitful tension between the social anthropological strata you unearth, especially in the Tantra, and the idealistic elements in the Dharma, even if these were seen one-sidedly in the West? You quote many authors I am familiar with and many more besides, and you refer to far more of their works that I have ever had access to. You quote them so regularly, though, that the differences between them tend to become invisible, as if they were all just providing corroboration of your Girardian thesis. I'm surprised you don't quote my friend Joseph O'Leary, one of the few Christian theologians to engage deeply with both Nagarjuna and Derrida, Nishida and Heidegger. Towards the end I felt that the book was becoming repetitious and even rambling at times. I think a publisher would want to see it trimmed back and focused on your underlying theme. You are obviously at home in both Sanskrit and German, but you will understand when I say that the English needs thorough correcting, grammar, spelling, punctuation, the lot, line by line, otherwise a publisher wouldn't accept it. And scholars would pounce on so many unclear statements. You need a native speaker to go through it in detail, something I can't do for you. But congratulations once again on a groundbreaking piece of work. Dr. John Darcy May, FTCD Emmer. Visiting Research Fellow, Irish School of Ecumenics, Trinity College Dublin Adjunct Professor, Centre for Interreligious Dialogue, Australian Catholic University Honourable Research Fellow, MCD University of Divinity Adjunct Senior Research Fellow, Centre for Studies in Religion and Theology, Monash University. Ilkwaen Chung has written a work of formidable scope and erudition. Now we have an in-depth interpretation of Buddhist social anthropology, philosophy, and practice from the point of view of mimetic theory. In effect, Chung has reopened the debate between Girard and the French deconstructionists in an exciting new way. In addition to Girard and various deconstructionist thinkers, he incorporates the thinking of figures like Kant, Nishida, and even Whitehead. Buddhism is both the meeting point for this discussion, but also the starting point for the discussion in the future. James L. Fredericks. A specialist in interreligious dialogue, especially the dialogue between Buddhism and Christianity. Professor of Theological Studies. Loyola Marymount University. This book is a provocative application of the theories of René Girard to the whole length and breadth of Buddhism's development from its roots in ancient India to its appropriation by Western practitioners and intellectuals. The author advocates a social anthropological approach to a field that is treated all too often through classical texts and philosophical ideas. This results in a deconstruction of central Buddhist ideas such as emptiness, rooting them in the ways of life of tribal peoples in environments of violent conflict. We are faced with serious questions about Buddhism's relationship to ethics and history. The implications of this for interreligious dialogue and the philosophical appropriation of Buddhism are profound. John Darcy May, author of Transcendence and Violence, The Encounter of Buddhist, Christian, and Primal Traditions. Ilkwaen Chung has written the most original, comprehensive treatment of Buddhism through mimetic theory to date. Everyone interested in the work of René Girard must read it. William A. Johnson. Your book was very helpful for me because you comprehensively processed the religious studies literature on Buddhism. I learned a lot from that. I was impressed by how the book uses Girard's mimetic theory to analyze the world-shaping, i.e. social, function of asceticism and monasticism in Buddhism. Only then did it become clear to me that the relationship between monks and lay people in Buddhism is quite different from that in Christianity. Bernhard Dieckmann, University of Marburg. Ilkwaen Chung uses all the resources of René Girard's mimetic theory to give fuller, more adequate explanations for Buddhism's traditions, practices, and rites. At the same he uses the fullness of Buddhism's history to test the adequacy of mimetic theory over against other attempts at this same analysis. He allows the Western reader to grasp more deeply just how deeply all religions are entwined with violence. This is a brave, wide-ranging book that advances the intellectual conversation of 21st century, the one between the East and the West. Jeremiah Alberg, Professor of Philosophy and Religion, International Christian University, Tokyo, Japan. Dr. Chung's investigation demonstrates the efforts of a rigorous and scholarly mind at work in an area central to our understanding of religion and interreligious dialogue. Dr. Chris Fleming. Apropos deconstructing the Buddhist philosophy of nothingness. Hi Ilkwaen Chung. I am a postgraduate philosophy student from Australia. I have been avidly reading your book on Buddhism and Girard. I am writing to tell you that I fully endorse this perspective. I have particular interests in comparative religion and the application of Girard's model to understanding the history of religion. I myself have studied and practiced Tibetan Buddhism. I was struck, and alarmed, by the sacrificial nature and symbolism of Tantra, which led me to abandon that tradition. Later, when I read Girard, everything fell into place. My interests are currently in critical theory, Frankfurt School thought, and understanding Girard's mimetic rivalry in relation to the socio-historical generation of consciousness and being, vis-a-vis Hegel and the post-Hegelian tradition, in other words grounding social theory. In mimesis, something which has hardly been done. You might be surprised to know that Theodor Adorno and Walter Benjamin touch on both mimesis and sacrifice, and tie it to modern exchange relations rather than religion or ideology. In my own researches in Buddhism, I always read the Buddhist dispensation as the internalization of sacrifice, a notion I got from A.K. Kumaraswamy's Hinduism and Buddhism. Indeed, it is in contradistinction to Brahmanism that Buddhism is often rightly read, I think, since the openly sacrificial nature of Hinduism, from human to animal and fire sacrifices, is clearly overcome or sublimated in the Buddhist internal sacrifice. The Indian philosophers already talked of tapas, self-sacrifice. But what is shocking is the level of self-deception in traditional Indian religion, which accepts both the right-hand and left-hand paths to so-called enlightenment. In Tibetan Tantra, the pervasive skull symbolisms and demonic representations are integrated into the religion. The legacy, supposedly, of Bon religion, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, is classic for this. The tales of the Siddhas, such as Milarepa, who practice black magic, but transform this into compassionate activity, nevertheless maintains a clear link to mimetic practice in a negative sense. The history of Indian Tantra is an interesting one. Do you know anyone who has written a history of this tradition from a Girardian perspective? There seems to be a wealth of material there for the taking. I was especially struck by the Tibetan practice of Guru Puja, which requires eating flesh and drinking wine, the 5 Ms of Tantra, traditionally out of a skull. Here is a clear reinscription of meaning on old modes of representation, but is its efficacy real? Does the partaking of sanctified flesh and wine in the Tibetan ritual achieve the same overcoming of mimetic rivalry and sacrifice as the Christian rite? From a scholarly perspective, the mere symbolism and semiotic shifting of meaning is enough food for thought. As to Sunyata and Nothingness, your reading is very insightful. I never thought of this idea, seeing Sunya as part of the whole mimetic introversion and sacrifice. It now reminds me of the passage in Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit where he talks about subjectivity in the negation of the object, the example being the act of eating, consuming. This constant, dialectical negation of being in its becoming is the Ahagoban, I suppose, of mimetic desire. I noticed your referencing of Zizek. I am a big fan, although his ideas of Buddhism always come across as caricatures, and his interpretation of Christianity in Orthodox theology I fully and heartily disagree with. He misses the Girardian moment of interpretation every time and then harps on about the death of God and Job's human all too human wisdom and responsibility, as though the Lacanian insight into the death of the big other was something that could fundamentally impact on social existence and history. Regards. Dmitry Vuros. My 6 Korean books have dealt with the interdisciplinary dialogue between René Girard's mimetic theory and other academic fields such as Buddhist studies, F. Nietzsche's Dionysian philosophy, Christian theology, postmodernism, poststructuralism and deconstruction, comparative mythology and modern natural sciences. Ilkwaen Chung, Buddha and Scapegoat, René Girard and Origins of Buddhist Culture, Seoul, SFC Publications, 2013. Hardcover. Winner of the Korea Christian Publication Association Book Award 2013. This book aims to analyze the process of idolization of enlightenment of Buddhas in the light of Girard's scapegoat mechanism. This book explores the unveiled scapegoat mechanism in Buddhism. 3. Ilkwaen Chung, Twilight of the Idols and Christ, René Girard and Contemporary Thoughts, Seoul, Hupbooks, 2014. Ilkwaen Chung, The Origin of the Universe and the Culture, René Girard and the Natural Science, Seoul, CLC, 2019, in Korean. This book explores the interdisciplinary dialogue between the René Girard's mimetic theory and the modern natural sciences such as chaos theory, mirror neurons, and the neurosciences, Big Bang cosmology and quantum mechanics. Unlike the anti-scientific tendency of postmodernism, Girard's Mimetic theory seeks to explore the scientific and universal understanding of human desire and human civilization. A member of the prestigious Académie Française, René Girard has been called the new Darwin of the human sciences and Einstein of the social sciences. Girard, like Einstein, created a framework into which the various subdisciplines such as anthropology, sociology, politics, economics, religious studies, comparative mythology and theology could be integrated into one set of basic ideas, into one story. Therefore, as Michel Serres puts it, Girard's scientific big questions could be understood as a kind of Big Bang of human sciences. This book deals with the various scientific views of many scholars such as Stephen Hawking, Steven Weinberg, Paul Dirac, Anton Zeilinger, Albert Einstein, Daniel C. Dennett, Richard Dawkins, Georges Lemaitre, Fred Hoyle, Paul Davies, Fritjof Capra, Wolfgang Pauli, Michael Faraday, James Clerk Maxwell, Frank J. Tipler. This book also elaborates notable scholars who have focused on studying the intersection of science and religion and science such as John Polkinghorne, Alvin Plantinga, Thomas F. Torrance, Michael Welker, Wolfhart Pannenberg and Raymond Schwager. This book has also critically re-examined the popular but superficial connection between Buddhism and the multiverse theory. Ilkwaen Chung, Twilight of the Idols and Christ, René Girard and Contemporary Thoughts, Seoul, Hupbooks, 2014. In this book, I have dealt with the opposition between Dionysus versus the crucified in thoughts of Nietzsche and Girard. Many thinkers such as Habermas, Levinas, Zizek, Vatimo, Simone Weil, Carl Schmitt and so on, have been discussed in my book, which attempts to elaborate on the implications of Twilight of the Idols caused by Christ.